The rain had been falling since early morning. Not the soft kind that people enjoy watching from windows, but the heavy kind that soaks clothes, chills the body, and makes the city feel colder than usual. The roads were wet and shining, and water splashed every time a car passed by. People walked faster than normal, heads down, trying to escape the rain as quickly as possible. Inside a luxury car, a rich woman sat quietly in the back seat. The windows were closed, the interior warm and dry. Soft music played in the background, but she was not really listening. Her mind was full of thoughts from a long day of meetings, phone calls, and decisions that affected numbers more than people. Money, contracts. Deadlines. This had been her daily routine for years. The car slowed as traffic became heavier near a signal. Rain hit the glass windows again and again, creating long lines of water that blurred the view outside. She looked out without interest at first, watching people rush by. Some held umbrellas, some used bags or jackets to protect their heads. Everyone seemed busy with their own lives. Then she noticed something that made her look. Again, near the edge of the road stood a small boy. He was thin, soaked from head to toe, and shivering in the rain. His clothes were old and torn, clinging to his body because of the water. But what made her heart stop for a moment was what he was holding in his arms were two babies. They were wrapped in thin, worn cloth, but it was not enough to protect them from the rain. Their faces were red from crying. Their small hands moved weakly, and their mouths were open as they cried loudly. Their voices almost lost in the sound of the rain and traffic. The boy held them close, trying to cover them with his own body. His arms were shaking, not just from the weight, but from the cold and exhaustion. Every few seconds he looked around, hoping someone would notice him. He raised his free hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to ask for help. Most people did not stop. Some drivers looked straight ahead. Some pretended to be busy on their phones. A few glanced at him for a second, then looked away. This scene was uncomfortable. Discomfort is something many people prefer to avoid. The rich woman felt something tighten in her chest. She had seen poor people before. Beggars were not new to her world. Her city had many. She had given money sometimes, usually from a distance, usually without stopping. She told herself that she helped through donations, through charities, through foundations run by her company, but this was different. This was a child, standing alone in the rain, carrying not one, but two babies. The boy could not have been more than 10 or 11 years old. His face showed fear, but also something else, responsibility far too heavy for someone so young. The car moved forward slowly. She thought the moment would pass like many others. But as the car came closer, she saw the boy's face more clearly. His lips were trembling. His eyes were wide and tired. He was trying not to cry, but tears mixed with rain ran down his cheeks anyway. He looked around again, then down at the babies, as if apologizing to them for the cold, for the hunger. For everything he could not give, one of the babies cried louder than the other. The boy adjusted his hold, whispering something softly, words the woman could not hear. But she could tell he was trying to comfort them. Even though he himself needed comfort, her hand moved slowly to the window button. Then stopped. She hesitated. A voice in her head said, "You can't help everyone." Another voice reminded her of meetings waiting, of a warm home, of responsibilities. It would be easier to look away, to let the car move on. But something would not let her. The car stopped completely as the signal turned red. The boy was now right beside her window. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto the babies' faces. He tried to shield them again, but his arms were tired. Without thinking too much, she pressed the window button. The glass slid down, and the sound of rain rushed in. Cold air touched her face. The boy looked at her suddenly, surprised. His eyes widened with fear, as if he expected to be shouted at or chased away. She looked at him closely now, really looked at him. "Why are you standing here in this rain?" she asked softly. Her voice was calm, not angry, not rushed. The boy did not answer immediately. His eyes moved to the babies, then back to her. His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. He swallowed hard. "They are hungry," he finally said, his voice shaking. They have been crying since morning." She felt her throat tighten. "Where is your mother?" she asked gently. The boy looked down. His grip on the babies tightened slightly. She is not here anymore," he said quietly. There was no drama in his voice, no loud crying. Just a simple statement, as if he had already cried all his tears long ago. "And your father?" she asked. The boy shook his head slowly. "I don't know," he replied. "He left before they were born." Rain continued to fall. Cars behind began to honk softly as the signal stayed red. But the woman did not care. Time seemed to slow down. "How old are you?" she asked. 10, the boy said. 10 years old. And holding 2 babies in the rain, her heart ached. "Do they have names?" she asked. The boy nodded but did not say them. He seemed unsure, protective, as if names made things too personal to share with a stranger. The light turned green, but the car did not move. The driver glanced at her through the mirror, confused. She raised her hand slightly, signaling him to wait. She reached into her bag and took out some money, more than she usually gave. She handed it to the boy. His eyes widened in shock. He looked at the money, then at her, as if unsure whether it was real. "Thank you," he whispered. But she did not close the window yet. "Is there somewhere dry you can go?" she asked. The boy shook his head again. "There was a place," he said, "but they asked us to leave." She could feel the weight of his words. No anger, no blame. Just facts. The rain seemed heavier now. She looked at the babies again. Their faces were pale, their cries weaker. They were exhausted. A sudden memory flashed in her mind, her own childhood long ago. A small room, cold nights. Hunger she never talked about. She pushed the thought away quickly, but it left a mark. She realized something uncomfortable. She had spent years building walls around herself. Success had protected her from pain, but it had also protected her from feeling too much. Standing there face to face with this boy, those walls were cracking. "I can't leave them like this," she thought. She opened the car door. The rain immediately soaked her clothes. People nearby looked in surprise. A rich woman stepping out of a luxury car into the rain was not something they saw every day. She stood in front of the boy now, rain running down her hair and face. "Come," she said gently. "Let's get you out of the rain." The boy froze. Fear crossed his face. He took a small step back. "I won't take them away from you," she said quickly, understanding his fear. "I just want to help." He hesitated. The babies cried again, louder this time. Finally, slowly. He nodded. She guided him toward the car, opening the door wider. The warmth from inside rushed out. The boy hesitated again, looking at the clean seats, the dry space, as if he did not belong there. "It's okay," she said softly. He stepped in carefully, still holding the babies tightly as the door closed behind them and the rain was shut out. Silence filled the car except for the babies' cries. The woman sat beside them, watching the boy's shoulders. Relaxed slightly for the first time, she looked at him and realized something deep inside her had already changed. And this was only the beginning. The car moved slowly through traffic, leaving the noisy road behind. Inside, the air was warm, quiet, and calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos of rain outside. The boy sat stiffly on the seat, holding the 2 babies close to his chest, as if the car might suddenly disappear and take the safety with it. He did not lean back. He did not relax completely. His eyes kept moving, watching everything. The woman noticed this, but did not say anything right away. She understood that trust does not come easily to someone who has learned to survive on the streets. She simply adjusted her seat slightly and asked the driver to turn the heater up. The babies continued to cry softly. Their cries were weaker now, more tired than loud. The woman took a blanket from the car and gently handed it to the boy. "Wrap them in this," she said quietly. The boy looked at the blanket, then at her. His hands hesitated for a second, as if he was afraid to use something so clean. Slowly, carefully, he wrapped the babies, making sure their faces were still free. As soon as the warmth reached them, their cries began to fade. One of them hiccuped, and fell silent. The boy let out a breath he did not even realize he was holding. "They like warmth," he said softly, almost to himself. She nodded. "All babies do." They drove for a few minutes in silence. The sound of rain on the roof felt distant now. The boy kept looking down at the babies, checking their faces again and again, as if afraid something might happen if he looked away. "You're doing a good job," the woman said suddenly. The boy looked up, confused. No one had said words like that to him in a long time. "I'm just doing what I have to," he replied. "That's what makes it important," she said. They stopped at a small clinic not far away. It was not fancy, but it was clean and open. The woman stepped out first, then helped the boy carefully carry the babies inside. The staff looked surprised at first, but the seriousness in the woman's voice made them act quickly. The babies were checked for fever, hunger, and weakness. The boy stood nearby the entire time, refusing to sit down. He watched every movement closely, his small hands clenched tightly. "They're very weak," one of the nurses said calmly. "But they'll be okay if they get proper care." The boy nodded, though his eyes filled with tears. He wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. The woman watched him closely. She could see how tired he was now that the danger had slowed. His shoulders were slumped. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He had been strong for too long. After some time, the babies were fed and wrapped properly. They finally fell asleep, their tiny chests rising and falling peacefully. It was the first quiet moment the boy had experienced all day. The woman bought him food from a nearby shop. When she handed it to him, he stared at it as if it were something unreal. "For you," she said. He shook his head quickly. "They need more later," he said. "I can eat later." She paused, then gently placed the food in his hands. "You need strength to take care of them," she said. "Please." He hesitated, then nodded. He ate slowly, carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear. With every bite, his body seemed to relax a little more. When they returned to the car, the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. The city lights reflected on the wet road. The woman sat quietly beside him. "Where have you been staying?" she asked gently. The boy lowered his eyes. "Anywhere," he said. "Under a shop roof, near the bus stop. Sometimes people shout." She nodded slowly. She did not ask more questions than he could handle. "Do you go to school?" she asked after a moment. He shook his head. "I used to," he said. "Before they were born." His voice did not carry anger, only acceptance. "They need me," he added. "School can wait." The woman felt something heavy settle in her chest. She remembered her own childhood again. Long days of struggle, dreams delayed. Responsibilities forced too early. The car stopped at a quiet building. It was not her home, but a small apartment she owned and rarely used. She opened the door and guided the boy inside. "It's just for tonight," she said quickly, sensing his fear. "A dry place to rest." The apartment was simple but clean. A bed, a couch, warm lights. The boy stepped inside slowly, as if entering another world. He sat on the couch carefully, still holding the babies. "You can put them down," she said. "They're safe." He hesitated, then slowly placed them on the bed, watching closely. When they did not wake, he finally leaned back against the couch. That was when the exhaustion hit him. His body shook slightly. His head dropped forward. He tried to stay awake, but his eyes closed on their own. The woman covered him with a blanket. She watched him sleep, his face finally free of tension. He looked younger now, like the child he was supposed to be. She sat nearby, unable to sleep herself. Her thoughts raced. She thought about her life, the comfort, the money, the distance she had created between herself and the world's pain. She had believed she was doing enough, donating, signing papers, writing checks. But none of that had prepared her for this. In the quiet room, she realized something important. She had been rich in everything except connection. The next morning, sunlight entered through the window. The rain was gone. The boy woke suddenly, sitting up in fear. He looked around quickly, then relaxed when he saw the baby sleeping peacefully, "You're still here," the woman said softly from the kitchen. He nodded. "I thought I was dreaming." She brought him tea and food. This time he accepted without hesitation. They sat quietly for a while. "I don't want to be a problem," he said. Suddenly, "You're not," she replied firmly. He looked at her. Carefully. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. She paused. "The truth was not simple. Because someone once helped me," she said finally. "And because I forgot how important that was." He nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but feeling the honesty. Later that day she made some calls. Not rushed. Not careless. Real calls. Thoughtful ones. She asked questions. She listened. The boy watched her, curious but silent. When she finished, she turned to him. "We'll take things one step at a time," she said. "You don't have to decide anything today." He nodded, gripping the blanket tightly. That evening, as the sun set, she stood by the window. The city looked calm, ordinary. But inside her, nothing was ordinary anymore. She realized that the rain had not only washed the streets that day, it had washed something inside her too, and the life she thought she understood was quietly changing. Piece by piece, morning came quietly. The city outside had returned to its usual noise, but inside the apartment everything felt slow and calm. The babies slept peacefully on the bed, their tiny faces relaxed, their breathing steady. The boy sat on the floor near them, watching closely. Even after a full night of rest, he did not allow himself to fully relax. Responsibility had become his habit. The woman stood near the window with a cup of tea in her hands. She watched the street below. People hurried to work. Cars moved quickly. Life continued, as if nothing unusual had happened. But for her, nothing felt the same. She turned and looked at the boy again. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. His clothes were still worn. His hands were small but rough, the hands of a child who had been doing adult work for too long. His face showed quiet strength, but also deep tiredness. "You slept?" she asked gently. He nodded. "A little. It's good," she said. "You needed it." He hesitated, then spoke. "They slept the whole night," he said, pointing to the babies. "That almost never happens." She smiled softly. "They feel safe." The word safe seemed to surprise him. He looked down at the babies again, as if testing the idea. "After breakfast." She suggested taking the babies for another checkup, just to be sure. The boy agreed immediately. Anything related to their health mattered more to him than anything else. At the clinic, the staff recognized them. The babies were doing better. They were still weak, but stable. The nurse smiled at the boy and told him he had taken good care of them. The boy's eyes filled with tears again. But this time, he did not hide them. When they returned to the apartment, the woman sat across from him. She knew this was not just about food and shelter anymore. There were questions that needed answers. Not for curiosity, but for understanding. "If you're comfortable," she said gently, "can you tell me what happened? How did you end up like this?" The boy stayed quiet for a long moment. He held one of the baby's tiny hands in his fingers. "We lived in one room," he began slowly. "It wasn't much, but it was home." She listened without interrupting. "Our mother got sick after they were born," he continued. "She tried to work, but she couldn't. I stopped going to school to help her." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "She told me to keep studying," he said. "She said school was important, but I couldn't leave her alone." The woman felt her chest tighten. "One night, she didn't wake up," he said quietly. "I tried to wake her. I shook her. I called for help. But it was too late." The room felt heavier with every word. "No one helped us after that," he continued. "Some neighbors brought food for a few days. Then they stopped coming." He looked up at the woman for the first time since he started talking. "I didn't know what else to do," he said. "So I went outside." The woman felt tears rise in her eyes, but she held them back, not wanting to make him feel uncomfortable. "And the babies?" she asked softly. "They cried all the time," he said. "They were hungry, cold. I tried everything." He paused. "I begged because I didn't want them to die," he said. There was no drama in his words, just truth. Something inside the woman broke quietly. She remembered her own mother, how strong she had been, how hard she had worked, how she had once held her close and said, "Never forget people who have nothing." The woman had not forgotten the words. She had forgotten the feeling. She stood up and walked to the bathroom, closing the door gently behind her. The moment she was alone, the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just deep, heavy tears that came from realizing how far she had drifted from the person she once was. She looked at herself in the mirror, well-dressed, successful, powerful. But she felt small when she returned to the room. The boy looked worried. "Did I say something wrong?" he asked quickly. "No," she said, sitting beside him. "You told the truth?" She took a slow breath. "Do you know," she said quietly, "that I also grew up with very little?" He looked at her in surprise. "I didn't always have this life," she continued. "There were days I slept hungry, days I felt invisible." He studied her face carefully, as if trying to connect the woman in front of him with the words she was saying. "I promised myself I would never be weak again," she said. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped looking at people who were." She paused. "Meeting you reminded me," she said. The boy did not fully understand her past, but he understood the emotion. He nodded slowly. That afternoon, she took him to a nearby park. The baby slept in a stroller she had bought earlier. The boy walked beside her quietly. He watched children play, laugh, run. "I used to play like that," he said softly. She looked at him. "You still can," she replied. He shook his head. "They need me." She stopped walking and turned to him. "They need you," she agreed. "But you also need a life." He did not answer. Later that evening, she made another call. This one was harder. It was about long-term care, education. Support. The boy watched from a distance, holding the babies. When she finished, she sat beside him again. "I want to help you properly," she said. "Not just for a day. Not just because it feels right." His face tensed with fear. "I won't separate you," she said quickly. "I promise." He relaxed slightly. "But we need to think about the future," she continued. "Your future." "Their future?" He looked down. "What if people take them away?" he asked. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "That won't happen," she said. "Not if I'm involved." That night, after everyone slept, the woman sat alone in the living room. She stared at her phone, at messages from work that she had ignored all day. For the first time in years, she did not feel guilty about ignoring them. She realized something important. Success had given her comfort, but compassion was giving her purpose. She understood now that this was not a random moment. It was not just about helping a boy and two babies. It was about facing a part of herself she had been running from. The next morning, she woke up with a clear thought in her mind. Her life was changing, not because she chose to help, but because she could no longer choose not to. The next few days passed in a way the woman had not experienced in years. Her life used to move fast, planned by calendars and meetings. Now it moved slowly, guided by small needs milk bottles, doctor visits, quiet naps, and long conversations that did not end. When a phone rang, she noticed how the boy followed a routine without even realizing it. He woke before everyone else, checked the babies first, changed them carefully, warmed their milk, and only then thought about himself. Even when food was placed in front of him, he watched the babies while eating, as if afraid something might go wrong if he looked away. One morning, she gently said, "You don't have to do everything alone here." He nodded. But his actions did not change much. Responsibility had become part of him. She decided it was time to take the next step. Helping emotionally was important, but the future needed structure, safety, stability. She spoke to people who understood systems better than feelings. Some listened. Some hesitated. Some warned her that things could get complicated. "This isn't simple," one voice said over the phone. "Once you get involved, it's not easy to step back." She replied calmly, "I'm not looking for easy." Still doubt crept in at night. What if she failed them? What if her good intentions caused more harm than good? She had built companies, managed crises, handled losses, but this felt different. This involved lives that trusted her without understanding who she was. One evening, she sat with the boy on the balcony. The city lights flickered below. The babies slept peacefully inside. "Do you ever think about school?" she asked quietly. He shrugged. "Sometimes. What do you miss?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Drawing," he said. "And running." She smiled softly. "Those are important things." He looked at her, unsure. "I can't leave them." "No," she said. "But maybe there's a way you don't have to." The idea stayed between them, unspoken but alive. The following day, she took him to a place that helped children return to learning while staying with family. The boy was nervous the entire way. He held the babies tightly, even though they were safe in the stroller. Inside, people spoke kindly. They asked questions gently. They did not judge. They listened. When they left, the boy was quiet. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. "No," she replied. "You did everything right." Stopped walking and looked at her. "If I study again," he said slowly, "will they be safe?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. He nodded. But fear still lived in his eyes. That night she received messages from work. Important ones. Meetings postponed too long. Decisions waiting. People expecting her presence. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed a short reply. Something she had never written before. "I need time." But it also felt right. Days turned into a week. The babies grew stronger. Their cries softened. They slept longer. The boy smiled more, though only in quiet moments. When he thought no one was watching, she noticed how he laughed softly when the babies made small sounds. How his face relaxed when they slept. How his eyes still carried worry, but also hope. One afternoon, while folding clothes, she found herself thinking about the future more seriously. Not in plans or charts, but in images. A classroom. A playground. A stable home. She knew she could not simply disappear from their lives after helping. She also knew she could not replace everything he had lost, but she could stand beside them. She sat the boy down that evening. "I want to be honest with you," she said. "There will be changes. Some days will be hard." He nodded. "But I will not walk away," she continued. "Not when things get difficult." He looked at her carefully, as if trying to measure the weight of her words. "People always leave," he said quietly. She felt the pain behind the sentence. "I won't," she said. He did not respond, but something in his eyes softened. The next challenge came sooner than expected. Someone questioned her involvement. They asked why she was doing this personally instead of through systems. They warned her of responsibility, of attention, of judgment. She listened calmly. "I'm not doing this to be seen," she said. "I'm doing it because I saw." That night, she lay awake thinking about the boy's words. People always leave. She realized that wealth had given her freedom, but it had also given her an escape from commitment. She could always move on. Always delegate. Always donate and step back. This time, stepping back felt impossible. She started changing small things in her life. She canceled unnecessary meetings. She stopped chasing things that once felt urgent. She began showing up herself. One morning, she walked the boy to his first class since leaving school. He was nervous. His hands shook slightly. "What if I forget everything?" he asked. "You won't," she said. "And even if you do, learning starts again." He took a deep breath and walked in. She waited outside longer than she needed to. When he came out, his face was different, tired but lighter. "They let me draw," he said quietly. She smiled. That evening, she realized something else had changed. She felt tired in a way that felt honest, useful, real. Not the tiredness of chasing success, but the tiredness of doing something meaningful. She looked at the babies sleeping and at the boy studying quietly beside them. For the first time in a long time, her life felt full, not because she had added something new, but because she had returned to something she had lost, and she knew now. This was not a temporary chapter. This was a turning point. Time moved forward quietly, the way it often does when life begins to settle. There was no sudden miracle, no loud celebration, no moment that felt unreal. Instead, change came in small steps, the kind that only feel important when you look back. The babies grew stronger day by day. Their cries became softer, then less frequent. Soon, they began to smile without knowing why. The sound of their laughter filled the apartment in a way that money never had. The woman often paused whatever she was doing just to listen, as if she needed to remind herself that this was real. The boy changed too, slowly, gently. He still woke early, still checked on the babies first, but his shoulders no longer carried the same weight. He started sleeping deeper, eating without rushing, laughing without looking over his shoulder. School became part of his life again. Not all at once, not easily. Some days were hard. Some lessons felt confusing. Sometimes he came home frustrated, worried that he was falling behind. Each time, the woman reminded him that learning was not a race. "You're not late," she told him once. "You're just starting again." That sentence stayed with him. The woman returned to work, but not the way she used to. She chose fewer meetings. She listened more. She spoke differently. People noticed the change before she did. She was calmer, less impatient, more present. Some asked questions. Some judged quietly. Some admired from a distance. She did not explain herself to anyone. She no longer felt the need to dot her. Home changed as well. It was no longer silent or perfect. Toys appeared in corners. Drawings were taped to walls. Bottles warmed in the kitchen. Laughter replaced the echo of empty rooms. One evening, as the sun set and light filled the room softly, the boy sat beside her on the couch. The baby slept peacefully nearby. "Do you ever regret stopping that day?" he asked suddenly. She turned to him, surprised. "Why would I?" He shrugged. "Your life was easier before," she thought for a moment. "It was lighter," she said slowly, "but it was also empty." He nodded, understanding more than he realized. Months passed. The seasons changed. The rain returned, then left again. But that first rainy day remained clear in her memory. Not because it was sad, but because it was honest. One afternoon, while watching the boy help one of the babies take its first steps, she felt something shift inside her. Not pride. Not ownership. Something deeper, purpose. She realized she was no longer helping out of guilt or responsibility. She was helping because she had chosen to care, and caring had changed her. She began supporting others quietly. Not with speeches or cameras. With presence, with listening, with showing up. She learned that help did not always need to be large to be meaningful. One evening, the boy sat at the table drawing. He held up his paper. It was a simple picture. 3 small figures under an umbrella. One taller figure standing beside them. She looked at it carefully. "That's us," he said. She smiled. "It is. Do you think things would have been different if you hadn't stopped?" he asked. She looked at him, then at the babies. "Yes," she said. "For all of us," he nodded. As the years passed, the story did not fade. It grew. The boy became more confident. The babies grew into children who knew warmth, safety, and love. They would never remember the rain or the roadside, but the woman would. She never told the story loudly. She did not need to. It lived in her actions, and whenever rain fell, she still paused at windows, not to look away, but to remember. How one moment of attention had changed everything. Because sometimes, life does not change when we plan it. It changes when we choose not to look away. Life did not suddenly become perfect. That was something the woman learned very quickly. Even though the hardest days were behind them, new challenges appeared in quieter forms. They were not loud or dramatic, but they were real. The boy continued going to school, but adjusting was not easy. Some days, he returned home silent. On other days, he asked questions that carried more weight than homework ever could. Why do other kids have parents waiting for them? He asked one evening. The woman paused. She did not rush to answer. Families look different, she said carefully. What matters is that someone shows up. He nodded, though the answer did not fully settle his heart. There were moments when the past returned without warning. A loud cry from the babies at night. A sudden storm outside. The smell of rain on concrete. Each time, the boy became tense again, his body reacting before his mind could calm him. The woman noticed this. She learned that healing was not about forgetting. It was about learning how to breathe when memories came back. One night, rain started falling heavily again. The sound echoed through the windows. The boy sat up in bed suddenly, his eyes wide. He rushed to the babies, checking them again and again. "They're okay," the woman said softly. Standing beside him, he nodded, but his hands still shook. She sat down next to him and stayed there until the rain slowed. She did not tell him to be brave. She did not tell him to forget. She simply stayed. That was something she had learned too. Staying mattered more than words. At work, her choices began to change things around her. People noticed she listened more. She asked different questions. She started supporting projects that focused on real people instead of numbers. Not everyone agreed with her direction, but she no longer needed everyone to. Once, someone asked her privately, "Why does this matter so much to you?" She answered honestly, "Because I saw what happens when it doesn't." At home, the babies began saying their first words. The boy laughed louder than anyone when he heard them. Each small milestone felt like a victory they had all earned together. The woman watched him carefully. He was still young, still learning, still carrying a past that had shaped him too early. But he was also growing into himself again. One afternoon, he came home with a drawing. It showed a road, rain on one side, sunlight on the other. "This is the day we met," he said. She looked at it for a long time. "Yes," she replied. "That's the day everything turned." "What if you hadn't stopped?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "I don't think about that anymore." He smiled, and for the first time, there was no fear behind it. As time passed, the woman realized that her life had changed in ways she could never measure. She was still successful. Still busy? Still strong? But now, her strength came from connection instead of control. She learned that being rich did not mean having more than others. It meant having enough to share, and the heart to do it. And on days when life felt heavy again, when doubts returned, she remembered one simple truth. Everything had changed because she chose to stop. And sometimes, stopping is the bravest thing a person can do. As time passed, life continued to move forward, but it no longer felt rushed. The woman noticed that the days had a different rhythm now. Mornings began with small sounds instead of alarms. Footsteps in the hallway. Soft voices. The quiet joy of knowing someone needed her presence, not her power. The boy had started to change in ways that were easy to miss if you were not paying attention. He spoke more in school. He raised his hand sometimes. He no longer sat in the back with his head down. Teachers said he listened carefully and helped others without being asked. At home, still cared deeply for the babies, but he no longer hovered over them every second. He trusted that they were safe. That trust was new. It had taken time to grow. One afternoon, he came home later than usual. The woman noticed immediately. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I stayed after school." "For what?" she asked gently. "Helping someone," he said. He explained that a younger child had been struggling with reading. Others laughed, but he stayed. He remembered how it felt to be left behind. He remembered how it felt to need someone to stop. The woman listened quietly, her chest filled with something warm and heavy at the same time. That evening, as they ate together, she realized something important. The boy was no longer just surviving. He was learning how to live. The babies grew stronger and more curious. They crawled, then walked, then ran through the rooms with careless joy. The apartment that once felt quiet now carried constant movement. toys scattered. Laughter echoed. Life filled every corner. Sometimes the woman sat alone at night after everyone slept. She thought about who she used to be. The woman who believed success meant distance. The woman who believed helping meant writing checks and moving on. She did not judge her past self harshly. She understood now. That version of her had been trying to survive too, just in a different way. One evening, rain began again. Not heavy, not loud, just steady. The boy stood by the window for a long time, watching. "Does rain still scare you?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No," he said. "It reminds me of what?" She asked. "That things can change," he replied. She smiled. The rain no longer meant fear. It meant memory, and memory no longer meant pain. It meant growth. At work, the woman started something new, quietly. Not an announcement. Not a public promise. Just action. She made sure help reached people who were often ignored. Not once, but again and again. She followed up. She stayed involved. Some nights were still hard. There were arguments, exhaustion, moments of doubt. That was real life. But even on the hardest days, there was honesty. And honesty made everything lighter. One night, the boy asked a question that surprised her. "Do you think I can help people like you do?" he asked. She looked at him carefully. "You already do," she replied. He thought about that. "I want to help more," he said. She nodded. "Then you will, at night." As the city slept, the woman realized that the biggest change was not in her life. It was in his belief. He no longer saw the world as something that only took from him. He saw it as something he could shape, and that was something no amount of money could buy. The rain stopped quietly outside. And inside, a new kind of future continued to grow steady, real and full of hope. Life continued, but it did not stand still. As the children grew, so did questions. Some questions were easy. Others arrived quietly and stayed longer. One evening, the boy returned home holding a folded paper tightly in his hand. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something heavy. The woman noticed it immediately. She had learned to read silence better than words. "What happened?" she asked gently. He sat down slowly. "School wants to know more about us," he said. "About where we came from." She nodded. She had known this moment would come. "They asked if we have family," he continued. "If there's anyone else?" The room felt quieter. She did not rush to answer. "And how did that make you feel?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Confused," he said. "Before, I didn't think about it. I just survived. Now, I think..." That night, sleep came late for both of them. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the weight carried by the older one. The woman lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about responsibility in a way she never had before. Not responsibility as duty, but as presence. The next day, she took time off work again. This had once felt impossible. Now it felt necessary. They sat together at the table. Sunlight came through the window softly. "You don't have to answer everything right away," she said. "Some things take time." He nodded, but fear still lingered. "What if things change?" he asked. "What if people decide something without asking me?" She leaned forward slightly. "Then we speak," she said. "Together." The word "together" meant more to him than he expected. It settled something inside his chest. A few days later, they went to meet people who worked with families and children. The boy was nervous again. Old fears returned quietly. He held his hands together tightly, just as he used to in the rain. The woman noticed and placed her hand over his. "You're not alone," she said. The meeting was calm. No one raised voices. No one judged. They asked questions, yes, but they also listened. That made a difference. Afterward, the boy let out a breath he had been holding for hours. "They listened," he said in surprise. "Yes," she replied. "You matter." That word stayed with him. At home, life went on. The babies learned new words. They stumbled, laughed, fell, and stood up again without fear. Watching them taught the boy something important. Falling was not the end. One afternoon, the woman found him sitting quietly with a notebook. He was writing slowly, carefully. "What's that?" she asked. "My story," he said. She did not ask more. Later that evening, he showed her a page. It was written in simple words, uneven lines, but full of truth. It talked about rain, about hunger, about fear. But it also talked about stopping, about warmth, about safety. "You can keep it private," she said, "or share it one day." "That's your choice," he nodded. As weeks passed, something else changed. The boy began to think about the future without fear. He talked about learning more, helping others, making sure no one felt as invisible as he once had. The woman listened, her heart full. One night, during a quiet dinner, he asked a question that surprised her. "Why didn't you walk away that day?" He asked. She paused. "I almost did," she said honestly, "but something felt wrong." "What?" he asked. "Pretending I didn't see," she replied. He nodded slowly. "I'm glad you saw." So was she. Later that night, rain returned again. Not the kind that scares, the kind that cleans. The boy stood by the window, watching calmly. The baby slept nearby, safe and warm. "I don't hate the rain anymore," he said quietly. "It brought change." She smiled. "Yes," she said, "it did." And as the rain fell softly outside, the woman realized something clear and strong. The story was no longer, "It's about saving someone." It was about growing together. And that kind of story never really ends.